So the goal has been to get primacy at the state level. And where do we stand today, guys? Like, we can start with Texas, we can start with other states, but what's the latest?
Well, I'll jump in for Texas, and then so it looks like I know something, and then Casey will jump in and flesh it out. And the short answer to this is that on April 29th, the EPA and the Texas Railroad Commission signed a memorandum of agreement and that kind of lays out what the basic turnover will be on primacy. And primacy, of course, is eventually the appropriate state organization will administer the EPA's rules for Class 6 wells, which is what a carbon storage well is. And the memorandum of agreement is not a final grant of authority, but it does delineate it. It's more like an 11-page document that it just kind of sets out what the general, okay, this is happening, what the turnover will be. Is it going to be pending cases? The answer is yes. And how will it indicates both the willingness of the RC to accept the responsibility and the EPA to let the RC accept the responsibility. The reason that it's far preferable for the state agency to administer the rules is that the RC is very, very deep in Texas geology and geophysics, and knows literally the lay of the land, as far as the avenues and topography that's going to be used for underground storage. So it's when any state gains primacy, it's a sigh of relief on everyone's part, because the state agency that's been responsible for administering the rules for the development of oil and gas is now going to, and has this huge store of knowledge, is now going to go ahead and administer the rules for carbon capture, which is something of an inverse process to oil and
Yeah,
gas development.
yeah, yeah. So what's the timeline typically look like? You mentioned you got the letter of understanding or whatever you referred to it as. From that point, when can we expect, or when's a reasonable expectation of when that actually is formalized?
I, I think the best guideline was probably how long it took some other states, and that's I'm gonna look to KC for that.
Yeah, so thanks, Jerry, for handing that over. And that's really good explanation as far as dividing it out between sort of the federal with the EPA and going to the state, like the
Yeah.
Railroad Commission with Texas. Um, Before states apply, and then to answer your specific question as far as timeline, it can vary. It can take several years. Texas has actually been working this for as long as some of the other states that have applied and have achieved primacy, Wyoming and North Dakota being the first. Then Louisiana followed with that,
Hmm.
and then West Virginia just at the beginning of this year. Um, so I think a lot of that has been timed on the discussions with the state agencies and how quickly they're willing to advance it. Seems that Texas has moved kind of in fits and starts, whereas in some of the other locations, it was a smooth, fairly year and a half to 2 year process, I believe, for like Wyoming and North Dakota. Louisiana took a little bit longer, but they had also delayed in their application. A lot of the timing has to do with understanding EPA rules because they're sort of the basis for it. And as the states are taking on the responsibility and achieving primacy, they are having to reassure that the standards that there's a clear understanding of what the existing EPA standards are so that there's a base minimum set for whatever state is going to put in place as their regulations. But then the greater efficiency is what Jerry referred to is each of the state knows their own constituency. They know They know the land, they know the geology, they know the actors that are involved and all the stakeholders. So they have a better idea of what they need to address on a local level. And Texas being such a large state, having such a long history of oil and gas production, it's a lot bigger and there's a lot more stakeholders involved and there's a lot more to go through. So that's
Yeah.
probably a good indication as to why it's taking longer. So there is no strict timeline, uh, but it, usually once all the stakeholders are lined up, it can be a fairly
Yeah.
quick process.
Okay. So primacy at its core and its most basic definition is handing over rights to a given state to administer the regulations of the EPA. But you mentioned, each state is obviously best suited to do that with respect to what's important to the state and the scenario circumstances with the given state. So you've got a baseline set of rules that the EPA sets, right? That's going to be universal for everywhere. What types of things kind of go above and beyond that a state may want to implement, or does it work that way? In other words, when you get primacy, are you establishing, all right, yes, we understand what is required of us as a state to administer the EPA's rules, but does the state get to add things to that or on top of that are specific to their state? Is that part of the process?
Yeah, so you hit the nail right on the head. With the EPA guidelines, they're setting what they believe is the correct measure for sort of technical safety and environmental concerns that you'll have to, and then as well as administrative, sorry. So that they're going to make sure that, the parties that are applying for these permits are fully suited for the work that they're going to do. They're going to make sure that they can operate in a safe manner, and safe being health of the people, the environment, and of the projects, right? There's a large technical review and going through the permitting process. So they want to make sure that the groups are technically savvy and know what they're doing. So there's a lot of hurdles that you have to achieve just to make sure that you're able to carry a project forward. But in the individual states, you have different concerns. Wyoming may have more of a particular mining coal focus where there's things that were developed in their state. I've been working a lot of projects in Louisiana where coastal wetlands are a serious issue. So, for Wyoming, it's not going to be as big a deal with the coastal wetlands, whereas Louisiana, you're going to have a very intensive focus on it because that's a very significant issue for Louisiana. So
Yeah. So I guess where we stand now in Texas, kind of bring it back to you, Jerry, is we're in that process of Texas and the EPA getting on the same page, make sure that all the ideas and things that are important to the state of Texas are aligned with what the EPA requires and expects of the state to be able to administer the program.
Yes, that's correct. I mean, Texas has made its representation that it can administer the EPA rules, and the EPA has accepted that. So
Yeah.
it's a
Now
question
we're
of
just
moving forward from there. There are of course other pieces to the Texas emergence as a
Sure.
CCS power, but
Sure.
that's fairly key.
Sure. And so you mentioned obviously the Railroad Commission is going to be responsible for this. What indications are we seeing? Is this do we feel like this is going to be a big enough thing to have kind of a dedicated CCS group within the Railroad Commission, or are they going to administer this through their normal oil and gas division? Have you heard anything to that point? Either one of you guys?
I have not heard anything. It would the RSC does a great job. Sometimes they are a bit thinly staffed. I imagine it's a continuous process as far as determining the allocation of work for existing staff. And it's the volume of CCS is probably not going to be high enough, for instance, to have a dedicated hearings examiner for it
Yeah.
or something like that. But they may choose to place the CCS caseload in the hands of certain individuals just to leverage that expertise.